There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Oh my goodness, have I had a week. I've had an interesting reading week, but I was laid low by the most literary of diseases. I'm borrowing that phrase from James of the Caustic Cover Critic blog. I just put up our chat video on Australian Lit last night. Please check it out. When I told him about my troubles, he said, "Oh, that's such a literary disease, Sean. How appropriate." I thought I sprained my ankle. I mean, I woke up, but yet I didn't think I did anything. What did I do? Why is it sprained? Is it just like an old man's little thing that goes wrong in the foot? But it was at the back of the foot, the right foot on the outside, going right up to the ankle. So classic. It was Doris, actually, that Dr. Doris diagnosed it as a sprain, but it was just mildly uncomfortable Monday morning, and by Monday afternoon, I was writhing in pain. And that level of pain continued until yesterday afternoon, Thursday. So from Monday afternoon to Thursday afternoon, I was in excruciating pain and could barely walk from my easy chair to the desk and to the bathroom. It almost killed me. And it took me about 4 or 5 minutes to walk, like I was dragging the foot. I was using a broomstick as kind of a cane, and it didn't help. Putting weight on that foot was just driving me crazy. I think it was Mel and maybe a few others I told on Voxer, I'm considering just peeing in an empty bottle tonight so I don't have to go to the bathroom. It was that painful. Well, and how did I sprain my ankle? Those of you that have caught the reference to the literary disease have probably already seen how this story is going to end. Went to the doctor, and when he got my a new doctor, just a doctor that was close to Kenji's in my place, and Kenji was great. He took me there by taxi, and it was Thursday morning. But there was a bad timing kind of thing in that he had a family emergency, and he was away on the night that I was at his parents', the night that I was in my greatest level of pain, and I was just like, oh my god, I'm gonna die, but I'm fine. He's been a great help. Once the doctor, this new to me doctor, got my medical history, he said, I think you have gout, because I had gout. I had a flare-up of gout once in my life, just around the time that I met Kenji 7 years ago, and it was pretty bad. But it never got this painful, and it was in a different part of the foot, and it was on both feet, if I remember. It was on the arch on both feet. And it was awful. I hated it. But so I was on the medicine, and it went away, and it never really came back, except for mild little things occasionally. So I kind of questioned, was that gout? I mean, isn't gout kind of more chronic than that? Like, years have gone by. I'm not going to share any more details about my medical history, but it's more likely gout, since there was no kind of ankle twisting or origin of the pain. So I'm on the medicine for that, and within probably 6 hours of taking my first dose of that medicine, I started to feel a lot better. And today my pain level is down to just mere discomfort, just mere annoyance. So I am almost ready to dance. So it's been kind of an ordeal, though. And I'm going to talk in a few minutes about how it affected my reading in a really positive, kind of crazy way. So stay tuned, just coming up soon. But let me now move on from the literary disease portion of my Friday reads to the, book part. So I'm giddy because I'm feeling so much better. And also I'm giddy because I'm going to have a lot of fun telling you how I just completely went out of control in my reading this week. Stay tuned. I finished one book, and that was Margarita Garcia Robeo's Fish Soup, translated from the Spanish by Charlotte Kuhn. And this was good. It was very good. I gave it 4 stars, and I quite enjoyed it. I found each of the works of fiction in here engaging. It started with a novella, and then a short story collection, and then finished with a novella. And I found all but the last novella somewhat kind of vaguely dissatisfying, but still enjoyed it. Like it didn't quite come together. I didn't think that it quite got there as a 5-star kind of reading experience, but I was still really engaged with it. The last novella sexual education I thought was stunning, and it was about a young Colombian girl who is being forced to take abstinence education at high school, and it contrasted with her own personal experience of her sexuality and in the dramatic lives, very sexually involved lives of her high school classmates, and I thought it was excellent. I would recommend it. And I will read more by Robeo, because this was perhaps an earlier work. It's her first publication translated in English. The translation, the writing was really good. She has had a novel published by Charcoal Press that published this, that came out in the last year, that I will definitely check out. So I'm glad I read it. And that was for the Columbia spot on the Invisible Cities reading project for 2021. And no bails. So just imagine me. I'm confined to my chair, and I have to get up and go to the toilet and maybe cook something if Kenji's not around to cook. But I had spent 3 or 4 days where I was just tethered to the chair, and as long as the pain in my foot wasn't distracting me, I could read to my heart's delight, and I was feeling otherwise kind of sorry for myself. And what that activated in me is just to just throw caution to the wind and just follow my bliss and throw my last remaining New Year's resolution out the fucking window. So my 6-book rule, boys and girls, is history. I am delighted to tell you. I'm not going to give you a total. I haven't counted. I don't want to know how many books I started this week. There's a couple that I've started that I've been holding off adding to my Goodreads. The others I have added, because I thought, oh, you're going crazy. You better be sure that you're actually going to keep reading this book before you add it. So I'm going to keep those off Goodreads until this video goes live, just to heighten the drama or something. Anyway, I'm having such a good time. I have started a whole swack of new books. I'm going to tell you about them. So let's go with that. I thought I might even finish this one, but I'm 60% of the way through this new translation out of Cameroon via Switzerland. A Long Way from Doula by Max Lobe, translated from the French by Roz Schwartz. New release like a month ago. I got it in the mail a few weeks ago, and I started it this week because I just it wasn't going to fit necessarily. Was Cameroon, by the luck of the draw, would Cameroon be featured in an upcoming Invisible Cities? And damn it, I just wanted to read it. So I started this one. This was one of the first that broke the dam of my resolve to stick to 6 books. So it's good. I'm enjoying it. I don't know how I'll ultimately feel, but it's certainly holding my interest on a deep level. And the premise is that the young narrator is like 20 years old, and his father dies suddenly, and his brother leaves the family in a huff because the family didn't support the younger brother's desire to be a soccer player, a football player. I think it's soccer/football. I'm so stupid about sports, but I think that was it. So that he just leaves in a huff, and he's trying to get to the West because his soccer skill is good enough that he thinks he could go pro. But yet the parents, the mother, they haven't ever supported him in that dream. And the older brother, the narrator, and a cousin or a friend, I haven't quite figured out if it's a cousin/friend or just a friend, they go off to try to track him down and bring him back. And so it's kind of a road trip novel through Cameroon, and this is set in the modern times as Boko Haram, the terrorist group that we all have unfortunately know too much about, is starting to encroach into Cameroon, into the area where they think the brother went as a way of getting to the West. And so there's a lot of suspense, and what it's doing extremely well is just creating this picturesque pastiche of the country and all the political, musical, historical, tribal realities of Cameroon in a way that's really vivid. I'm not sure about the overall story yet. I won't know until I finish it, but I am definitely engrossed in it. And he's a gay writer, and he has, I think Max Lobe has lived in Switzerland for several years, like maybe since about age 20, and he might be maybe 30. I can't remember what I've heard about him, but he's a Swiss Cameroonian writer. He's lived in Switzerland for years. And this is a very Cameroonian tale, and my first anything set in that country, and I am enjoying it. The legit book that I told you I would be starting as part of the Irish Readathon, I have indeed started, and that is Anne Enright's The Green Road, and I'm really enjoying it. It is one of the best ones I'm reading for the Irish Readathon so far. Beautiful writing. The story is really interesting. Now, the story is quite similar to Mary Costello's The River Capture, and also the fact that a grandmother is kind of really key to the story. It's quite similar to Michelle Gallen's Big Girl, Small Town. But that's fine. I'm keeping them all, the storylines all separate. The writing is lush. I'm loving it. The protagonist is a young girl when her older brother becomes a priest, and the parents, especially her mother, is so upset that her son, her fair-haired son, I don't think he had fair hair, but he was her pet, decided to enter the priesthood, that she takes to bed in a temper tantrum for days and days, which didn't strike me as... I'm curious. The family dynamic is being revealed piece by piece, where I can kind of contextualize that, but it was a surprising part of the story. And then suddenly we flash to about 7 years later, and that priest's son, I think his name is Dan, but I'm not good with names, he's on the title of the chapter, but he hasn't shown up in the story yet. But it's a very gay living with AIDS story centered on lives of gay men, so I don't know if he eventually came out and he's going to be one of the characters in this very gay story. I have no idea, but it's also compelling, and it's such a jarring turn from the earlier Irish part of the story. I don't know. I think maybe it's ringing bells in what I've heard about this novel, actually. I have a really useful ability of suppressing whatever I've heard about a novel so that I don't care so much about spoilers, hearing a spoiler review, because I'm able to just put it away. So I think I remember hearing people talk about this novel in that way, that it has a big gay part of the story, and that big gay part of the story is also working for me very well. So that's starting out fantastic. One of the countries for invisible cities in March is Mexico, and because of that I have started another book from Charcoal Press. That is Loop by Brenda Lozano, translated from the Spanish by Annie McDermott, and it is very different. It's experimental, and I wasn't sure in the first few pages whether it was going to work, because it just seemed to be all over the place without any narrative thread that I could grasp onto. But now that I'm a couple chapters in, there is a narrative thread, and it is a first-person account of a young woman that, after kind of being lost and having a lot of difficult experiences in her life, she finds a great boyfriend and moves in with him, and then he goes away across the pond to visit some Spanish relatives, I think, and is he ever going to come back? And she's so insecure, and it's written kind of, it really is written in a journal format, and she is very self-reflexively writing about writing, and her personality is extremely endearing. I love her, and she has these quirky observations about life and writing and sex, and it's beautiful. It's too early for me to know whether it's going to be a Sean book, but I am quite enamored of it. It's a short little one, so I will finish it fairly soon. Do you remember I read a book that was an excerpt of entries from a gay architectural writer's diaries? What the hell was that book called? I couldn't find it and pull it off the shelf to hold it up. It was one of the best books I read last year. Some Country Houses and Their Owners, and it was a slim little volume that was extracts of James Lees Milne's diaries. And he worked for the National Trust for years, and the National Trust in the UK, one of their missions was to take back famous country estates from their noble owners who were having trouble paying the taxes on it. And so they would donate them to the National Trust, who would kind of run it as a open, some of them, many of them were run as open to the public kind of museum type things, but that they were cared for and under the custody of the National Trust, and the noble owners sometimes negotiated that they could live in a smaller portion of the house, or they just left entirely, but they got a good deal on the taxes. So he was one of the point men that would go and visit and negotiate, and his diary entries are absolutely fascinating, portraying these upper class, snobby, eccentric, weird people with humanity and humor and wit. Just delightful. The little book was great, but it just got me interested in reading James Lee Milne's diaries in their entirety. So I downloaded, they're dirt cheap by ebook. I downloaded volume 1, which is, I think, 1942 to 1954. And I've started reading it. I'm only partway through the introduction, and the introduction gives a lot of biographical detail about him. He was gay, bisexual, had love affairs with so many famous glitterati and literati. Vita Sackville West's, what was her husband's name? Harold Nicholson. He was Harold Nicholson's private secretary for years, and through Harold met and slept with most of Harold Nicholson, Vita Sackville West's husband's boyfriends, including James Pope Hennessy. I don't know if they slept together. I hope so, but full circle, right? Because James Pope Hennessy is the Queen Mary biographer, and he was a fabulous writer, and he was really hot when he was younger, and so was James Lee Milne, and they traveled in the same circles, and I'm just geeking out in the gayest way possible. So I love having that on the go, because I will dip into it. That's the kind of delightful nonfiction read that I can read at the end of the day when I'm too tired to read literary fiction. So it's perfect. And I'm Googling the shit out of it, as I love to do, and going down this rabbit hole and that rabbit hole. So I'm just delighted that that is now part of what I have on the go. You're not counting how many of these there are you? Because I'm not. I refuse to count. And Britta reminded me, I don't think I ever really knew that March, in addition to being the Irish Readathon month, and there's a bunch of things going on BookTube, Mystery Madness, and the March of the Mammoths, that it's also Women's History Month. I don't know if I ever had that in my brain, but because Britta put it there, thank you, Britta, I have added one of the few books on my shelf that would kind of fit as a woman's history type read, and I have started it and am really enjoying it, and that is The Only Woman in the Room by Beata Sirota Gordon, a memoir of Japan, human rights, and the arts. Beata Sirota Gordon came onto my radar when I read John Dower's fabulous history of post-war Japan called Embracing Defeat, and she was hired as a 21-year-old by the General MacArthur occupying forces, what was it, SADP or something, SDP. Because she had grown up in Japan, she was hired to come over and work with their reconstruction stuff. And she ended up, and I don't remember the mechanism, in this book is going to tell me all of the fabulous details, but she ended up writing women's rights into the new Japanese constitution that the occupying forces imposed on the country. So that ultimately, for many years, women in Japan, theoretically at least, constitutionally, had more rights than women in America. So it was a very enlightened human rights document, the Japanese Constitution, and that is due to this woman, Beata Sirota Gordon, and this is her memoir of all of that. It's a slim little volume, it's really well written, her family background is fascinating. Her father was Leo Sirota, famous pianist, and he and his wife lived in Japan during the war, and when she arrived back in Japan to take her job, she finally found them. There had been no contact. I think there was no contact between them during the war, or very little, and they were almost starving to death. And that situation soon improved. But reading all the background of her parents, it's just fascinating on absolutely every level. So this is my Women's History Month read, and I probably will do a full review because it's just fascinating. The rabbit hole that I went down on this morning has nothing to do with Japan, but it was about her father, Leo Sirota's emergence as just this boy wonder of a pianist. Grew up in Kiev, I think, the Ukraine, and he was discovered. He was giving concert tours before he was 9 years old. By the time he was 10 years old, he was teaching piano lessons to 20-year-olds and eventually got over to Vienna. And one of his mentors was a fabulous Italian name. Busoni is the surname, but Ferruccio Busoni took him under his wing. He had a letter of introduction from one of his famous Russian mentors to hand to Busoni, but he gave a few concerts and kind of got acclimated to Vienna before he went and knocked on Busoni's door, and he'd given these some concerts, as I said. And Busoni said, "I don't need to read this letter. I've heard you play." And he just took him under his wing. And so I didn't know anything about Busoni. I think I've heard the name. There's a few very short recordings of Sirota's piano performances and of Busoni's. And one of the ones that's available on YouTube, and I will put a link to it because it's one of the most stunning classical music performances I think I've ever heard. It's Busoni playing this very technically difficult work by Liszt, where he kind of reinterpreted a work of Mozart's that Busoni played, and he died in 1924, I think. But so sometime before that, he played it, and it was recorded by piano player. And I was vaguely aware of that piano player technology because my grandma Mooney had a piano in her house that had been a player piano. So if you don't know what a player piano is, it's the technology was developed. I don't know much about it, but I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole this morning, and I had this vague idea of it because we had one in our house that had been altered to become a regular piano. There's a tape, a roll, so that it's the music is recorded on a roll of, not tape, I think it's much thicker material, and I don't know anything about that. And then that roll is put into the piano, and I think you can take it out and put a new one in, or you can put several in, and then the piano plays the music as that roll winds through the piano, supposedly exactly the way the original pianist played it, like with every nuance exactly replicated. And there's some debate about how accurately it could reproduce what the original, because so there's piano rolls in existence by many famous pianists and composers that were alive at that time, including Busoni's version of this very difficult piece by Liszt, which is called Reminiscences de Don Juan, the piano roll. I'll put a link. It's 12 minutes, and I think it's just stunning. And I did Google it to find that critics say that most of the piano rolls of Busoni don't reproduce his incredible piano playing gift well enough, but this one does. And I don't know anything about piano playing or music. I listen to classical piano music exclusively when I'm reading. I can't listen to jazz. I can't listen to an orchestra because the instruments other than piano distract me. Even though I like some of that music, I love jazz. I can't listen to vocal music of any kind. Pulls me out of the reading, but classical piano music is what I have on all the time when I'm reading. Anyway, that's all I don't know what I'm talking about. Just this, listen to this piece. It's incredible. So, Ferruccio Busoni. So that all came out of the first few chapters of this memoir by Beata Sirota Gordon. And I have started it as a buddy read for the Irish Readathon, Edna O'Brien's debut novel, The Country Girls. I don't know when it was published. 1960. It's part of a trilogy, the Country Girls trilogy. And this is a buddy read with Sonia of An Enthusiastic Reader. We buddy read a collection of her short fiction last year, A Fanatic Heart, which we both loved. It was the best short story collection I read last year, and it made me fall deeply in love with Edna O'Brien's writing, of which I hadn't read very much until then. And so we decided to slowly, over a course of a year or two, read the Country Girls trilogy. So this is volume 1, and I've only read about 20 pages of it. Just started it yesterday, and I love it. I can't believe that she wrote that well in her debut, but having read a lot of her later work, or a lot of her short fiction that dated from her early in her career to later, She just turned 90 a few weeks ago. Yeah, it's stunning. So it's about a country girl, and she's got a crazy mom and an alcoholic father and a hired man that when she was 4 years old, she thought she was in love with, but now that she's grown up, and I don't know how old she is at this point, 14 or 15, he's got green teeth and never bathes. And so she still loves him, but she's thinking maybe the marriage thing in the future isn't in the cards, and there's all of that. And, it's apparently a very sexual novel, which caused such a scandal that Edna O'Brien had to leave the country, move to England. I think it was at London, and I think she stayed forever. Fascinating. So I can't wait to keep reading it and check in next week with Sonia on the first half. So those are the ones that I've started that I have not been ashamed. Ashamed is not the right word, but where I had no compunction about putting them on Goodreads as I started them. But I have 2 more that I won't put on until this video goes live. This one is also kind of a culprit, and this was the one that led me to just, maybe I could just do this one on the sly and not talk about it, not put it on Goodreads until I finish it. And that is this collection of microfiction or flash fiction from Ireland that Ronan Hession recommended in my Zoom chat with Covery Madavad and Ronan. Some Days Are Better Than Ours by Barbara Bjar, and they're page-and-a-half short stories, flash fiction. So when I was working at my computer, I would kind of open it. When I was supposedly teaching a Zoom class and I had the students working on an activity, I'd just open it and read another story. And so I was kind of cheating because I was going past my 6-book rule, and this was the gateway drug, this book. So it's really good. I don't have much to say about it yet. I've only read about 4 of the stories, but this one I will come out of the closet and put it on my Goodreads later today. It's really good. And this is the one where if you're not sitting down yet, you should probably sit down before I tell you this one. I don't know how in my browsing on Scribd I came across this book, but I started reading it, and I have now read 4 or 5 chapters, and I'm absolutely in love with it. And that is the children's novel that I loved as a kid, 101 Dalmatians by Dodie Smith. I read it when I was about 8 or 9, and I loved it, and I've always remembered how much I loved it without remembering very much about it. Don't remember if I ever saw the movie, have no interest in seeing any of the remakes. You've heard me say time and time again that children's literature does not interest me. YA is just anathema. So this was also related to the excruciating pain I was in, and me kind of feeling sorry for myself, and kind of everything feels different and everything feels up for grabs when I'm in that kind of a space. So I came across it browsing, doing something on Scribd, and I love that book. Maybe it would make me feel better. So I started reading it, and I just got sucked in, and I've kept up with it. So I am now out of the closet as currently reading Dodie Smith's 101 Dalmatians and absolutely loving it. It's really witty, and I love the fact that the 2 Dalmatians, Pongo and Mrs. or something, that they are getting quite a kick out of the fact that the humans that they keep as pets think that they are keeping the Dalmatians as pets, and there's a whole bunch of very endearing humor along those lines, and Cruella has made an appearance, and I have vague memories of what I've heard about the movie, and that Cruella, she's the villain, and she has already shown her cards about that, but it's just great. So I'm going to keep on going, and who knows where that could go. So my snobbish genre predilections also feel like, I don't know how far I'm going to go with this. Like, should I try an Agatha Christie novel? I loved them when I was a teenager. For March Mystery Madness, every time I've tried a mystery since I've been on BookTube, it has not gone well. I'm not making any promises about anything to do with that, but it was really quite beautiful and crazy how that happened. So it did happen, and now you know. So that's what I've started. And who's counting? I'm certainly not counting. I don't want to know how many books I'm currently reading, but now it's time for me to tell you what I'm planning to start the coming week, because yes, I have books that I want to get to that I want to at least start in March. And here are the ones that I am planning to start in the coming week. I will probably try to exercise a little bit of common sense and not start anything new until I finish some of the ones I'm currently reading, but I'm also not going to promise that either. The one that I'm worried about forgetting because I don't have a physical copy, I will start with first to get that out of the way. And what was it? Oh, yes. Libya is the other country for Invisible Cities this month. And I've had a dickens of a time finding much Libyan fiction. I read Hisham Matar's novel. I didn't really like it very much a few years ago. And I know he's got a memoir out there, but I was looking for something that I already had on the shelf, and I don't have anything from Libya on the shelf, or on script. So the one that I'm going to try, it's like a 100-page novella from Purine Press. And I have to say that I haven't read anything from Purine Press that I thought was any good, so I don't have high hopes. So, my snobbishness has not gone out the window, people. I just think they publish inferior literature. That's having tried 2 or 3. But I will try Under the Tripoli Sky by Kamal Ben Hamada. 99 pages, set in Tripoli in the 1960s. That's all I need to know, so I hope that I get along with it well. And I have been dying to get this ever since I first heard about it. Can't remember if this book haul video has gone up already or not. I think it has. Hilary Leichter's Temporary, 2020 novel, based on her experience of being a Kelly girl. Now, I know I've gotten comments about this from people, so I have talked about it. I am going to start it this week, because I've heard really good things about it, and it's going to be a trip down memory lane for me of my days of being a secretary, being a Kelly girl. So, it was a podcast interview, and I can't remember the name of the podcast right now, but I'll put a link in the show notes, because I have put that link in when I mentioned it before, and we're going to see what this is all about. Heather of Soggy Expat Book Nerd, a channel that if you don't follow it, you must. She's absolutely fabulous, and she's woefully undersubscribed for how entertaining she is. She's an American married to a Welsh guy living in Wales, and she brought the Wales Readathon to my attention. I don't know if it's new this year. I think it came from the blogosphere. So I've just gone back to her video about this. So I'll put a link to Heather's video where she talks about Dewithon, and she talks about the fact that this was created by the book blogger Paula, whose book blog is Book Jotter. I'll put her link in the show notes as well. So I was already up to me oxters with Irish Lit, so I thought, oh, damn. So I said to Heather in the comments, I'm going to do a 50-50 split in 2022 between Irish Lit and Welsh Lit. And then my New Year's resolution to only be reading 6 books at a time went out the window, and I thought, hey, I'm going to do one, at least one, this year. So it's one that I've had on my shelf for a while, and it's one that Heather, I think she's finished it, but she was reading it this month for Dewithon, and it is One Moonlit Night by Caradog Pritchard. Translated from the Welsh by Philip Mitchell, and it's supposed to be really good. Set in the mid-1910s. Slim little one. I've been wanting to read it forever, so I'm going to dive in. And finally, in some of my book hauls, I have shown you the beautiful books that are being reissued by the British Library Women Writers series. And I have, I think, all of the ones that have been published thus far. They started coming out last year. And I have them all, and I haven't read one of them, and I'm going to start this week with Tea is So Intoxicating by Mary Essex. Mary Essex, born 1892, died 1984. That's just one of the many pen names that the writer Ursula Bloom used. And Ursula Bloom, was one of the most popular and best-selling authors of the 20th century. And I've never heard of her, and I've never heard of Mary Essex. She once was recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records as the most published female author. I don't know how she would ever have beaten out Enid Blyton. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Oh, but I love the little synopsis, which I've just scanned. It's about a young couple that opened a tea house, but then rumors start going around the village where they have maybe just moved to, I don't know, I don't want to know too much, but I've just scanned it enough that they've opened this little tea house, and then rumors start flying around the village that they're not actually married. And so the lady of the manor takes it on as a personal mission to shut this tea house down. Okay, that sounds great. First published 1950. Yeah, this sounds like a Sean book. So, what do you think? I love my new life with no boundaries, no limits. I'm not going to say no to anything, damn it. And I'm almost ready to dance around the room with all these books I've got on the go. Thanks for watching.